right, so I promise no political talk today after a year and a half of a process. I don't know if you're anything like me, but I've had enough of it. But I am curious who stayed up late, just so if I see somebody nodding off, I can like throw something that direction.
You'll have to nudge me then.
Laugh, make a joke or something.
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, nice.
Me too.
Anyway, thanks for coming tonight. Hi, my name is Rick Brimacombe, and on behalf of the Network Connect, welcome to another session in our series of reverse elevator pitches. Tonight, you're going to hear from a panel of investors who have a long history of evaluating business opportunities, and we're going to learn about their criteria for assessing investments. Dick Sommerstedt, who's out talking in the hall, surprise, surprise. Dick had the original concept for the Network Connect back in 2011, and Dick and I joined forces in 2013 to form the current iteration of this business. We've refined the idea over the last couple of years and have now created a platform to connect investors, companies, and preferred service providers, and also provide a catalytic gateway to fuel business growth. We're serving the entrepreneurial and kind of lower end of the middle market. Our events and contacts have helped companies over the last couple of years raise $4.2 million through our contacts and network. And our newsletters now reach 15,000 investors and referral groups and 35,000 business contacts. So we have a lot of heads of angel groups as contacts in our network. So if you send an email to one person there and you have their whole network behind them, that's how we get to the 15,000 investors. Before we get to the panel discussion today, I'd first like to say thank you to our sponsors, Wilkerson, Guthman, and Johnson, CPA and consultants. We have Ron, two people to my right here. We have anybody else, or are they also out in the hall talking? No, we got a couple of more folks there. Thanks for participating and being a sponsor. We appreciate that. Insperity is a full-service human resources services firm. Kristen and Joe are back there. Thanks for participating. Schwegman Lumberg Woosner is an intellectual property law firm. Olson Thielen CPA is a full-service accounting and consulting firm. Mike Bromelkamp in the back, so he stayed up real late, and so when he falls asleep, he thinks I'm not going to be able to see him back there. Clean Tech Open is also a sponsor, as is the University of St. Thomas. So thank you to all of our sponsors. You folks make these events happen. Thank you for providing your sponsorship, your time, and your energy. We appreciate that. To stay connected, there's a couple of different ways. You could give me an email address, a business card, or what have you, so I can add you to our list, as well as we have a website, thenetworkconnect.com. Lastly, out on the table, there's a little card like this that has our events for 2017. We have 4 of these events, the reverse elevator pitches, and then we have 3 events called the ICE events, Investor Connection events, and those are where companies get to pitch. So this is the opposite of that. We're hearing from the investors. At the other events, you get folks who get to present their ideas to the community. We also will try to reuse the badges, and there'll be a basket out there if you can return your badge. And as far as announcement goes, that's the end of that. What's fun for me on this panel is I've known all 3 of these guys for a long time. In fact, by the color of my hair, you can tell about how long it is, because starting on the far right, Gary Petrucci, who back then was at Piper, I worked at Piper in the late 80s and early 90s. As a young guy in the corporate finance department, so I met Gary a lot of years ago. And then Ron Lenz in the middle here. Ron and I met through venture capital deals that I was doing, and him in the accounting world. And then Brad Larriman to my immediate right. Brad also has a venture capital background, and Brad and I invested together, shared deals, and I've had probably, unfortunately, it sounds really long, probably about 75 years of history with the guys here at this table. So anyway, it's a real pleasure to have everyone here. I will start with a little bit more background on Brad, since he's to my immediate right. Brad, as I mentioned, is in the venture capital industry. With his background, he's also a securities attorney and partner at the Soffer Charbonnet law firm. He practices in the group's corporate finance and entrepreneurial venture group. He has an extensive background over the years as an attorney, a business advisor, a private investor, and board member focused primarily on the early stage market. Brad has devoted the majority of his professional life to innovation and helping build a stronger entrepreneurial community in Minnesota and the surrounding region. Mojo, Minnesota, which he might mention, is something that Brad founded, and I've been involved in that group over the years as well. In the middle, Ron Lenz. As I mentioned, Ron's background is in the accounting world. He is a CPA and a partner at the Wilkerson, Guthman & Johnson firm in St. Paul. He's been practicing in accounting for over 30 years. Over that time frame, he's worked at one of the big four CPAs, as well as had 2 iterations of his own accounting firm. In 2008, Ron joined Wilkerson, where he's a partner and works in the areas of audit, tax, financial accounting, budgeting, strategic planning, and business consulting. Ron also works with closely held companies and is actively involved in the early stage financing community. He's got a proven track record assisting companies, and I know personally, because I've been watching from afar as well as seeing those companies out in the marketplace, his network has helped fund a number of different businesses. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, I met Gary a number of years back. Gary is Senior VP and Financial Advisor now at RBC Wealth Management here in Minneapolis. He's a financial advisor and has been in the brokerage industry for 48 years, going back to starting at Piper Jaffray in 1968. He served on the Piper Jaffray Board of Directors from 1981 to 1995, and in January 2009, he joined RBC Wealth Management. Currently, Gary serves on the boards of 2 stem cell companies, as well as on the boards of Motorsports, Urologic Research Foundation, and CardioFlow, where he's founder and chairman. In the past, he served on the boards of Cardiovascular Systems, where he was co-founder and former chairman, America's Back and Neck, Lettieri's, St. Cloud State University Foundation, and the U of M Landscape Arboretum. So again, there is a wealth of knowledge up at this table, and it's a pleasure and an honor to have everybody here. Thank you for joining us. Again, for those of you who've been here, these are intended to be for you and to provide information, wisdom, knowledge, and whatever else we can get to you. I have some questions. We can start with that, but at any point in time, if you have an interest in asking a question, please just raise your hand and we'll try to get to it. So first, I gave you a little bit of background on their personal bios, but let's maybe get a little color from them, fill in the cracks and so forth. Why don't we start here closest to me? And Brad, tell us a little bit more in your words about your bio.
Well, thank you, Rick. Thanks for the invite. It's wonderful to be part of this august body, and thank you all for coming tonight. So I'm a Minnesota native, and I've had a great career in the innovation community in a really different kind of dimension, not just as a securities lawyer, but also as an individual who has been a private investor of 2 syndicated angel funds. And for the purposes of this panel, I'll give you just a little bit of context. I started the first fund in 1997, and they've run from 1997 until last year, 2015. And we invested in fund number 1 in 9 companies and had 6 exits. And in fund number 2, we invested in 15 companies and had 4 exits. And I have done a lot of work as a board member for those companies as well as general counsel. And I've been active in the angel community. I'm on the board of Go for Angels here locally. I started an innovation co-op called Mojo, Minnesota, that if you haven't seen some of the work we've done, a lot of outreach and mentorship to young entrepreneurs, along with some lobbying and work up at the Capitol on things like the angel tax credit or the R&D tax credit. And I'm also very active with the Minnesota Cup business plan competition. I've been a judge since inception. So if there's a task force on innovation, I've probably been on it. But it's been a lot of fun, and it's an area that I believe is absolutely essential for the macroeconomic growth and success of this region. So thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks, Brad, for doing all that. You definitely have been on all the groups and committees and started things. Maybe given that we talked just for a moment about Mojo, maybe just put a little shout out to Mojo and maybe explain a little bit more about that.
So Mojo was started in the depths of the 2008 recession, and so myself and several people, including Rick and some other folks, one of my co-founders, Ernest Grumbles, who's an IP lawyer, we were sort of sick of hearing people bitch about the problems associated with the recession, and we said, we need a lot more Mojo in this community. And so Mojo Minnesota had a nice ring to it. We actually trademarked it. That's what lawyers do. And we then pulled together a group of people to help talk about how we raise the bar of innovation companies and entrepreneurship in the region. And we call ourselves agitators. We don't call ourselves a board. We don't write white papers. And we do outreach programming. We do mentorship with programs called Mojo Mixers, which are like speed dating for entrepreneurs. And as I said too, we have our own in-house lobbyist, and we do a fair amount of public policy work up at the Capitol on issues of small business and innovation. So that's Mojo.
Great.
MojoMinnesota.com.
Great, thank you. Ron, you and I met way back when in the venture capital world in your accounting days. Tell me a little bit more about your background and fill in some of the cracks on the bio that I shared with everybody.
Sure. Thank you, Rick. Thanks for asking me to be on the panel. Well, I've actually been in public accounting for over 30 years. I've been accused many times as not being the normal CPA, but someone that is always trying to help businesses move ahead and grow and succeed. As such, I like to consider myself to be an entrepreneur. So I've gone in and helped many businesses start and help put businesses together. Way back in the 80s, I worked with CDI when CDI first began. The Center for Diagnostic Imaging started one of the first magnetic resonance imaging centers here in Twin Cities. I was in the in the early 90s rather. I worked with Alan and Dale Klapmeyer. I was on the front end to help put together Cirrus. Bill King and myself went all over the United States and basically all over the world talking to different investors to help finance and put together Cirrus, which is Cirrus Aircraft today. But it goes on and on and on. I've worked with multiple companies. At Wilkerson, we work with small companies and we work with middle market companies. Many of our middle market companies, we go to $1 billion in revenue or over $1 billion now in revenue for some of our businesses. But all of our businesses that we have in our firm at one point were startups. They began somewhere. They began with an idea and a concept. And so I thought it would be a good idea to give you all a packet of information. It's really rudimentary per se, but Brad and I recently were working on a client and we were talking about using this business plan template. And it's, I have it in your packet here, but basically it helps a starting business go through and list out what they need to consider in writing a business plan. So a lot of people start with the value proposition in the center here. I would have thought that would have been a natural area to start. But they start with key partners and they go to key activities and it kind of helps you fill in and put structure to a business plan and to the structure of building out your overall strategic plan. Then being a CPA, many times I've been asked to put together a forecast or projections if it's going to one group or one investor or to a bank, forecast if it's going into private placement. And so I put in here also just a basic template, if you will, so that you can start to think about putting together projections or our forecast. And then I also put in here just some other thoughts with respect to the different stages of development and considerations businesses, as they're looking for capital, should consider. The one thing that I have, in working probably over 1,000 startups in my career, the one thing I have seen that everybody thinks they have the next greatest, best idea, and they can solve the world with if they only had money. And money is really the last thing that they should be looking for. They should be putting together their plan. They should be putting together their structure. They should be putting together their management team. They should be putting together their board of advisors, their advisory team. And once you get all the cogs put into place, then money will generally come to the business. It's hard to comprehend, but that's what I found in my experience.
Thank you very much. Gary, tell us a little bit more about your background. I know it's a lengthy bio, and I gave some of it, but just tell us a little bit more.
Well, thank you very much. When Ron was talking, it reminded me of when I started as an entrepreneur. It was when I was 19. And I used to sell for the Hope Chest companies over in China. I put myself through college doing that. But Wayne Field, who was our CEO, started a company for nursing homes. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense. And so I put some money into that deal, and it was successful. So that kind of got me started on the route. I know we're not supposed to talk politically, but actually,
If you want to, go ahead.
this is the first time I've sat on this side of the podium.
Feel free.
I don't know how many people have read Atlas Shrugged in this room. Quite a few. And it's one of the more popular books but it was written back in the 60s. And it was all about how the government kept taking more and more control of businesses and asking more and more in terms of taxes. And finally, these people, the Shakers, went on strike, and they all moved to a secret place. And I felt we were heading that direction. And thank God we had an election last night that is going to change it. And it's going to change it for the people in this room, because you're the Shakers. You're the people that are the entrepreneurs that are going to make new things happen. And without all these regulations and government oversight on top of you, it's going to be a lot easier. And I'm hopeful that will happen. I'd been at Piper for a number of years, 38 years. Then we got bought by a Swiss company called UBS. And I couldn't stand working for those Swiss Nazis any longer. So I went across the street to my friends over there. I knew the CEO well, and at RBC. But when I went over there, I said, our industry was founded on raising money for corporations. And somehow, because we all got sued and they said this guy lied, this guy said this guy said that, our industry stopped raising money, and it's a shame. And I said, now with new technology, we can raise money safely. And the way it works is we have our CEO of the company we're raising money for make a presentation. We have our compliance people scrub it. And we have our corporate finance people help price it. And that video becomes the prospectus. And all our brokers do then is introduce a client, and he goes online, says he's an investor, says he's qualified, accredited, watches a video, says he watched it, and then asks for the prospectus, and then we send that out. So if we ever get in court, that will be the evidence, not what he said or she said. So this is a new innovation that we're trying at RBC.
Great, thank you. So shifting a little bit from the bios to the investment background, why don't Brad, let's start with you. Talk a little bit about kind of your investment background in the group, and maybe it's both historical as well as current, who's in it, so forth. And then after that, and we go down the list, we'll come back and we'll talk about kind of individual investment criteria. So maybe just a little background in your group.
Sure, thanks. So I got started in private investing as an attorney who was working with emerging growth companies. So when I was a partner with a law firm actually that I was practicing with in St. Louis, the principals there were very active angel investors, and I sort of used them as lead blockers to learn how to do this, and found that I liked it and I was good at it, and it was really enjoyable, and there was a lot of energy around this area of business. So my wife and I are from here. We moved back to the Twin Cities after several years in St. Louis, and I started a fund called Portage Equity Investments, and the holding company was Portage Capital. And just so you know, I love the Boundary Waters, and that's where the name comes from. It's a portage from point A to point B, and hopefully you're going to the next best lake and you're doing the next best deal. That's the double entendre of portage. So the company was basically funded by myself and about the first fund about 25 limited partners. And we invested in deals that were in, I would say, the classic early stage pre-venture kind of company, meaning they were too early for venture capitalists to get involved. So we would put the first $50,000 to $200,000 into these deals, and they were in the categories and industry of medical device, clean tech, a lot of software at that time in fund number one, a lot of software, and semiconductors. And that went very well, and that was sort of through the heyday, rah-rah times of the 90s. We then did a second fund that, again, we probably had 45 limited partners. I was the general partner, put in my own money along with side by side with everybody else. And that was a more painful experience in the sense that we started that literally 2 months before 9/11. We kept it going, and we raised the capital, but that was painful. And then we were in a class of activity where as exits were starting to incubate and percolate, which was 2007, 2008, after the capital had been deployed, there was going to be no exits. 2008 was the recession, and things fell back, and it resulted in a great elongation of exits, which is one of the things I want to talk about later tonight, about how to compress time frames. Because if you're involved in taking other people's money or writing checks for yourself or your family in these companies, you need to know how to get out. You need to know how to exit. And I've been a minority investor in some of these deals for as short a period of time as 3 years, and for as long a period of time as 14 years. And that could be painful. And there's ways, hopefully, to short circuit that. So that's sort of the background. And in terms of the second fund, it was much more oriented, I would say, towards clean tech, mobile apps, software, a few medical technologies.
Great.
And some biopharmaceutical.
Great, thank you. Ron, tell us a little bit about your investment background, the group that you kind of run with, and so forth.
Yes. At Wilkerson, we work with a lot of high net worth individuals and family funds. And so periodically, they'll be looking for different types of investments, and so I've introduced them to different investment opportunities. And throughout my many years in accounting, although I'm not a licensed securities broker like Gary, I've been a connector to connect different groups and different people together. And so what I found, again, this is from experience, is that the investor has to fit the situation. And so you may know high net worth people, or a family fund, or a venture fund, or a specific group that you think could invest in your opportunity, but it's got to be the right fit. And so finding the right fit for the opportunity is by far the key thing. And so as an example, at Cirrus, we talked to a lot of people that really loved aviation. They had a passion in aviation. They were high net worth accredited investors, but they also had a passion for aviation. Gary, when we worked on Reliant Technologies, there were a lot of people that had a passion in medical. And so they looked at it because it was a medical company or medical device company. And so finding the right investors to the situation is what I found is the key. And so I've been, like these two guys, I've been kind of the conduit or the connector to try to connect the dots to the right investor group.
Great, thank you. Gary, tell us a little bit more about your investment background and the different kind of groups that you've run with, and maybe even expand a little bit on the technology developments that you have at RBC.
Well, Ron brought up Reliant. This was a company that I was one of the founders, and it was a laser company. And we had a lot of IP, we had a lot of different directions to go. And we had a doctor in from Harvard, and he said, you know, I tried that laser on my hand, and it had just small spots. So it wasn't like the current laser that just ablates the whole face or hand or whatever. And we could have gone a number of different directions in this. We had a lot of IP and a lot of different ways to go. And after I listened to this guy talk for a while, I made a motion that we focus only on this. And this is a mistake a lot of companies make. They have all these things that they can do, and they're trying to do everything. And as a result, we ended up with the Fraxel laser, which became the top laser for resurfacing the skin on the face, and we sold it to Thermage. But had we made the mistake of not focusing, I don't think it would have been as successful. And that's the one piece of advice I could give you, and is to figure out what your main focus is and don't deviate. Just work on that, and when you get that developed, you can go to the next thing.
Good enough, great. Last question for the panel, and then we'll, as it relates to your background, then we'll get to some other specific things. But when you're looking at an investment, what are the couple of things that jump out at you right away? Some people are completely focused on the team, other people are interested in the size of the market, but what are kind of the hot buttons that are of most interest to you?
Starting with me?
Sure.
So I think everybody has sort of the same checklist that they start with in terms of the analysis. It's team, it's technology, it's market, it's valuation. Those are sort of the hot button checklists. The team being very important, the technology being protectable with some IP, hopefully, and the market being large enough to support a business model that makes sense for outside investment. If you're going to sell 7 to 7 left-handed redheads in Montana, not a good business model. So, and then the valuation, I find that many companies don't spend a lot of time on figuring out the valuation proposition as to how much they're giving up with the company. That's a really, really important part of the equation. All that being said, my experience has been that team is more than 51% of the equation. And for me, it's not about, this may sound strange, but it's not about IQ, it's about EQ. And so when I have looked at lots and lots and lots of business plans and met with lots of management teams, there's really smart people usually involved. And that's great, and it has to be essential for them to have subject matter expertise associated with their business. But it's the people who have EQ, who have empathy, sympathy, understanding, and capability to communicate with others that actually cross the finish line. Otherwise, they get to the 5-yard line, the 2-yard line, the 1-yard line, and they don't finish. And a lot of it has to do that they think their way into paralysis. So I sort of established an EQ framework that I use in my discussions with people that I think are different than just how smart are these people.
Great, thank you. Ron, what are the things that are of most interest to you when you look at a deal?
I would piggyback off of that same answer. The number one thing is entrepreneurial people really have a passion for what they have created. And many times they don't have all of the different components that are necessary to run a business. They might not be the sales group, they might not be the production group, they might not be the technology group, even though they came up with a concept. They might not be. And so I think it's really important to surround them with mentors and advisors that can build out and create that team. And we find that even in our middle market companies. We work with a lot of family businesses, and they've gone to, one day they're at $5 million, and tomorrow they're at $50 million. And they still think they can conquer the world and do everything, and they can't. And they have to bring in mentors, they have to bring in advisors, they have to hire the right people into the right buckets, the right seats on the bus, if you will, to make that business grow to the next level. And if that's one bit of advice I could give you, I would leave you with that.
Great, thank you. Gary?
Yeah, I agree with the four statements that you made. People is really important. That's the major thing I look at. And one of the things I look at is, has the CEO been successful before? Or have he failed? I mean, has he been at a company for 1 year and then another company for 2 years and another company for 6 months? I mean, I want the person that's been there for 20 years and decided to start this deal. You know, there are so many people out there that are going to try to pull the wool over your eyes, so you got to be careful. But that's, and then the valuation part of it, I also look at that and decide how much skin they have in the game. That's also important. And I look at the people, and it's not IQ like he said, I look to see if they got fire in their belly. Because believe me, starting a company is not easy. It's hard. It's hard work. And the first 2 years are really miserable. I'll give you an example. I sit on 2 stem cell boards. One of them I've been on for 10 years, called StemMedica, and it's a company that is producing stem cells for humans. I have a daughter who was a veterinarian up in San Francisco, and after I started to see the results and the miracles that were going on with stem cells, I convinced Catherine to come down to San Diego and start this company, and she worked in the lab for a while. And she was so mad at me for 2 years. Because, you know, I mean, all the BS that you have to go through with the government, with insurance companies, and hiring people, and just trying to get this thing off the ground. And that's why you have to have that fire in your belly, and you've got to be competitive and want to make it work. And today, she's very happy with it. She's probably the top company in the animal world. She's developed stem cells for pets, and you should see the miracles that have happened there with dogs and horses. So, but the point is, you've got to find the right person that is willing to sacrifice today for tomorrow. And, you know, and the entrepreneur has to do things today that most people won't, so they can live tomorrow like most people can't.
That's good. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Why don't we just stay down there, Gary, with you. Are there a particular stage that you're interested in seeing, and any particular industries that you're most interested? So stage and industry.
Well, I'm like you, Rick, in that I usually like the startups or the early stage companies. I've always been interested in the medical field the most. I don't understand technology that well, but I do understand the need for certain medical things. As he mentioned, I was the co-founder of Cardiovascular Systems, which is a public company now. We have a Roto-Rooter deal that cleans out your arteries, and We saved 900 legs last year that would have been amputated, because, and mostly in diabetics. If I have a minute, you want me to tell you a little more about it?
Sure.
Now, this is a good example. I started this company along with Dr. Leonard Sturman. Dr. Sturman is a Russian immigrant, spoke 5 languages. He was an MD. He was also a PhD engineer. Brilliant man, but he was kind of crazy. You know, I think he was bipolar. I mean, I could put up with him. And we did all of our R&D over in Russia. And this was right after the Iron Curtain dropped. And we probably saved $50 million doing it over there. We were hiring post-PhDs for $600 a month, and this was a gift, I mean, as far as they were concerned. So anyway, there's so many stories I could tell you about Dr. Sturman, but I'll be brief. But after a while, I said, now look, Dr. Sturman, it's time to bring in a CEO to run this thing. And he got mad and went back to Switzerland. And all of our R&D was in Russia, everything. So he said, all right, now, Gary, here's what it's going to take to get me back, and it would have screwed all the shareholders. So I'm not going to do that, Len. So anyway, I got in contact with a Russian that lived here also, but he also knew the Russians over in the lab. And Sturman had us by the short hairs because there were 2 main patents we needed. And even though they worked for us, they had to assign them to us. But he said, I'm not going to let them. And of course, they're over in Russia and we're here. So I asked Vladimir, I said, look, contact those guys, tell them I'll give them $10,000 each to come over here and sign over those patents. So we met at my house, gave them each 10 grand. Had the patents in Russian and in English. They signed them over. And then I gave them a laptop to go copy all the CAD/CAM drawings for us. And also we needed this winding machine, which was specially made it had to wire 3 wires, I guess. So anyway, so they're going back over to Russia, and they're in 2nd class. And there's Len Sturman in 1st class. It was almost like a novel. You didn't see him, though. So they sent this big winding machine over, and it was right after 9/11. It got stopped in the customs in Chicago, and I had to get a senator to get it released to us. Without that, we were dead. Anyway, then I hired Mike Kellogg, who was a PhD out of Medtronic. And Mike hired a bunch of students from the university that spoke Russian. And they had to then, all of these CAD/CAM drawings were in Russian. So we had to then translate everything. And then I got Larry Lemke, who was CEO of St. Jude Medical, to come on the board. And if you know Larry, you know how conservative he is. And Larry said, Gary, before we go any further, I want to make sure this has good IP. So we hired a guy that had retired from Medtronic. He was their chief legal counsel. He came to the meeting. He said, you've got a lot of patents, but your main one is the best written patent I've ever seen. And Len Sturman had that ability to sit side by side like this with the patent lawyers, go over every word that they were doing. And as a result of that, we started Cardiovascular Systems. Now, the point I'm making is that I could have let that die. And who would have complained? Everything was in Russia, and there's no way to get it and all this. This is what I mean about having that fire in your belly. I'm going to write a book on starting companies. And the name of it's going to be, It's Easier to Die Than Get Well. And that's what happens. A lot of people give up, and they shouldn't. And they should just keep plugging away and figuring how to fight back and get back to whatever they were trying to solve and whatever. So it's, like I said, it's not easy, and but the reward is there. And I feel good about saving 900 legs last year that would have been amputated.
Yeah, Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that. Ron, how about you? What stage companies are you most interested in, and what industries are most interesting to you?
I like working with early stage companies, but I've worked with companies in all different stages. And so having the background of working with companies from small to very large has helped me basically impart knowledge to my clients on the different stages that they need to go through during their cycle of development. In the packet, I included a summary of some of the things that you need to look as you go through the different stages. Early on, you're looking at angel investors, and again, or angel groups, or high net worth families that invest, or families that invest, and you have to put the right group again with the right technology, or right industry rather. As you move down through the different stages of development, you have to look at, eventually you may want to get an institutional investor. And an institutional investor could be a strategic, or it could be a venture group. Or it could be looking at some other type of investment, like an IPO, or an acquisition. And so the key thing that I'm trying to say there is you have to look out to the future and see what is the best type of investor that you need to get at the different stage of development that you're in. And so I've worked in all the different stages, and I'd like to ask these guys how they feel about the different stages and the different types of investors. But that's what I've gotten
I
from
can comment, but I hope I don't step on some toes here, but, I've been doing this for a long time, and the mistakes that I made were twice, bringing in venture funds. And they have one thing in mind, and that's their agenda. And I know it's an easier route to go. You just go, I sell one guy and get this money from a venture fund. But we have sworn off venture funds, and we'll never, any company I'm involved with will never do it, unless they come in on the same terms as our other investors have. But at STEM Medica, we've raised $70 million so far, all from individual investors. And at CardioFlow, another company I haven't talked about that I started, the same thing, not 70 million, but we've raised money from all individuals. I feel more comfortable doing that. So that's just, have your eyes wide open if you're gonna do a deal with a venture fund, and watch out for participating preferreds and all those kind of little wrinkles they like to put into it. So I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes, but that's my
you're good.
opinion.
So this makes for a good, panel discussion, because I'm going to disagree with you, Gary. I appreciate your feedback, but yes, venture capitalists can be tough. But just to piggyback off your comments, first of all, if you have a really good lawyer, a securities lawyer, you won't get beat up on all those rights like participating preferred. So there you go, hire a good lawyer. But also, not all money is the same. And there are venture capitalists who have amazing networks and have opportunity sets to compress timeframes to get you into distribution channels or to joint venture partners that you can't do with $70 million worth of individual investors. I mean, that's how I look at it. And if the objective is to build a business and create an exit opportunity where return on investment is one of the issues, then I think venture capitalists can actually be helpful. So, different perspectives here.
Picking the right venture capitalist.
Very much so.
Yeah, so for
They're
you,
not all equal.
Correct. So for you, Brad, stage of company and specific industries that you're interested in?
Yeah, so like Gary and Ron, I also have preferred early stage investments and early stages, so seed round and Series A rounds historically. And I find that at that point you have usually pretty receptive management teams who will listen to terms and valuation discussions that aren't in concrete, don't have stakes in the ground that are too tough. So I think you can have a good dialogue. And industries have always been platform technology industries. They're companies that can create higher multiples upon exit. So medical device, semiconductors, mobile apps, clean tech, software.
Okay, great. All right, so open this up to the panel. Whoever wants to jump in first, have at it. Let's say you meet somebody new out there in the hall and they give you a quick and dirty spiel on what they're doing, or somebody sends you a plan or executive summary. What are kind of the first couple of things that you see and you just go, not interested? They say something, you read something. What's kind of that deal killer, or what do they do that like immediately causes you to sour on what they're telling you?
I'd rather focus on the positive than the negative,
Well-
if you don't mind, because I'll tell you.
That's the next question.
Okay. Oh, I preempted you. Sorry. Well,
Let's go ahead. Say the positive.
Well, the positives will be whether or not that they can message their technology and their business model in an effective way. This gets back to EQ that I talked about earlier, emotional intelligence. So messaging is really important. We saw the importance of messaging in this election. You could say in one sentence on a hat what President Trump, can't believe I'm saying that, stands for, but you could say it in one sentence. Hillary couldn't do that. So the fact is you need to be able to message effectively when you shake somebody's hand and say, here's what I'm working on, and don't tell them how the watch works inside. Just tell them what time it is.
Great. Guys?
I think for me, the key is to have an entrepreneur that's open and willing to learn and to work with other people. Not anything specific, but I worked with some people that are control freaks.
Not that any of you would
Yeah,
fall
you're
into that
control
category, but
But they think they can do everything. They can solve everything. They can solve every problem. They can do absolutely nothing wrong, and they're probably not going to succeed. And they may have the next greatest, best product in the world, but you have to be able to learn. You have to be able to be open. You have to be able to create the team around you. You have to be able to, and the team is the funding group, as well as it is your mentors and your advisors.
Gary?
Completely agree with that. I mean, a company is just made up of people, and it's that simple. And a CEO, you want a CEO that has the ability to attract the top people for whatever job they need done. That's what a CEO does. And if they have that ability, and I look for that. I look for the size of the market, how big it could be. I look at their IP, if they have IP, or where they're at in the development stage. But again, it just really gets back to the people that are involved. You can have the best technology in the world, but if the people can't execute, it's not worth anything. You know, I've always, at Piper, in the corporate finance area, if you list the top 3 things that you're looking for in a company, first one is people, the second one is people, and the third one is people. So,
All right, thank you. So the folks in the audience, or at least many of the folks in the audience, are trying to raise capital. What recommendations would you give them in terms of the fundraising process or the presentations that they're going to be giving?
So in terms of the process, networking is going to be absolutely critical. So this kind of activity, meeting people, shaking hands, getting out there, it's a full contact sport. So you really need to get out there and turn over all the stones that you can. So raising money is not for shy people. You really have to get out there and do it. In terms of the messaging of how you want to do it, there's a really good book that is written by a guy named Guy Kawasaki, who started a company called Garage.com, and maybe many of you here have read it. It's called The Art of the Start. And that book has a very good template that the book's 20 years old probably by now, but it's got a wonderful template of how you go about telling your story. And for example, there are many presentations that I've seen. I've seen literally probably 10,000 business plans and investor decks. And Guy Kawasaki says, just do it in the 10, 20, 30 rule. 10 slides, 20-point font. No, 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. And if you can't tell your story in that framework, you probably can't tell your story effectively. So I'm a big believer in making sure that you follow an understandable, digestible format that people can be interested in, because your first meeting, your only objective in your first meeting is to have a second meeting.
Great, thank you. Guys, you want to chime in on that one? Again, people that are out raising money, what would you tell them as far as the process goes, or their investment pitches?
I would reiterate what Brad said. I think it's important when you first put your presentation together to give your presentation to someone that's been in the area of listening to presentation. If it's a professional person like Joan Moser or Spoken Impact, or if it's just like Rick or Dick, so that they can critique it and give you some honest feedback, or one of these guys that have seen many deals. But I think when you give your first pitch to an investor or an investor group, after the meeting, be honest. I mean, ask them questions. How did I do? Is there anything that you see I could do better? If they're not going to make an investment, do they know anyone that they could give you 3 names? If you ask for names, if you ask for some leads, you're going to generally get them. And I've also found that if you ask in a way that how you actually did the presentation, or to help with the critique, you'll get an honest answer versus just, that was a great presentation, or it was so boring, I fell asleep like Jeff Washy did.
Gary, any suggestions for folks who are out raising money or their pitches?
Well, like Ronald Reagan could take a complex subject and boil it down in 3 minutes and make it understandable. And that's what you have to do. I know you'll have a complex technology, and I think you said don't, tell them what time it is, don't explain the watch. And Dale Carnegie had a thing, after 2 minutes, stop boring. Convince people in 2 minutes. Then, the other part of it is, have all kinds of stuff in reserve. So then when they ask you a question, you know every answer they're going to ask. And that's important. So you get the broad framework out there quickly, get them interested, and then they'll start asking questions, and then you'll know the answers to every question, rather than show those questions in the beginning.
Great, thank you. Again, if anybody has specific questions, I have more here and can keep going, but if anybody has a question, please let me know. Old saying of when you want money, ask for advice, and when you want advice, ask for money. Anyway, have you received any advice over the years that has kind of stuck with you, or you've used it as you look at deals and assess companies?
Gary, why don't you start?
All right, let's see. Okay. I wrote down an answer to that. The advice that has stuck with me the most is when I've lost. And you learn from your losses. I mean, it's not something that anybody can teach you. And when you lose on something, you look back on it and go, what did I do wrong? What didn't I understand here? So that's the advice that I've learned from, is when I've made mistakes.
How do you, when somebody comes to you and they've had a track record, you mentioned earlier somebody having success, but when they come to you and they've done stuff that hasn't worked, do you dismiss them and say, well, gee, you had a loss before, so therefore I don't want to invest in you? Or do you try to get some context around that and ask them just what you said there from a learning perspective? Hey, what'd you learn over there? And granted, maybe it didn't work, but that might help you do the next deal better. So are you open to folks out raising money after they've done things that hasn't worked?
It's a red flag to me.
Okay,
I usually pass.
all right. Ron or Brad, any advice that anybody gave you over the years that kind of resonated and stuck with you?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to be tenacious. Recently I've been the CFO for a new technology company. My partners at Wilkerson have allowed me to actually step out of the firm and become the CFO on a part-time basis for this company. And it's a very innovative company and has game-changing technology. But one of the things that I found out through working with them was not to be afraid to basically push the envelope and try to get out there and look at all avenues as you're raising capital. And so be tenacious. Don't think that just the one or two opportunities or leads that you have are going to be successful, because it's probably not going to be those. It's going to be something else.
Great, thank you. Brad?
When I first started doing some private investing, I met with a very, very seasoned private investor who was very successful. He's since passed away many years ago, but the advice he gave me sort of stuck with me for many decades, which was don't go against the flow. It's really, really hard to invest against the flow, even if you think you have something great. So try to stay within a syndication model that goes with the flow, and try to figure out what the next flow is. So both don't go against the flow and look around corners to figure out if you can create that flow. And that was good advice, and I've used that many times.
Cool. So I'm going to add a little tidbit of advice that I got, and then have that lead into the last formal question I'm going to ask. Again, if anybody has questions, there is an opportunity here if you want to take it. Anyway, so I worked at Norwest Venture Capital when I was early in my career. After I'd met Gary at Piper, I went to Norwest, and there was a gentleman there who was on the private equity side. John Thompson was his name. And back then at Norwest, the venture capital side and the private equity side were all under one roof, and I was supporting people on both sides of the house, so I was learning both industries, which was good. Well, anyway, John had a little ROI card. Back then it was just on paper, and he gave it to me on one of my first days there. And he said, call this your John Thompson Pocket Guide to Success. And if you take this with you, you're never going to go wrong, because it causes you to focus on the exit and the returns. And we heard on valuation and pricing earlier. And so at Sherpa Partners, we had these made up and laminated, and I still carry them with me a couple of decades later. And it does keep you focused, because if you can't make 5 times your money in 5 years, you're not going to be in the 30s from an IRR perspective. And if you're not in the 30s from an IRR perspective, it's not worth doing. The risk is too high, and the returns have to be greater than that. In fact, you probably have to be much greater than that, but it just has stuck with me. So I have my John Thompson Pocket Guide to Success. It's fancier and laminated now, but I still go with it, and I give him credit for it looking back a couple of decades. So that leads me to my last question, which is, do you focus on return goals and expectations? In which case you probably have to look at the financials fairly closely. And so do you have return expectations, and do you back into investing kind of looking at that return analysis, or is the investment decision more of you like the people, you like the product, you like the market, it's big enough, and kind of more that way?
Well, I think it is that way, but you also look at what the potential is, and I don't go into a deal unless I think it's a home run with everybody on base. You know, I mean, otherwise, why bother? So
what does a home run look like to you?
Well, I mean, you look at what the potential sales could be, the sales ramp, and the profitability of the company going forward, and then you look at the valuation and you go, what is this going to be worth in 5 years? And if it's a major home run with everybody on base, that becomes interesting to me. If it's just a single or a double, because most of them that you think are home runs with everybody on base turn out to be singles and doubles, you know. So you got to start from the fact that you're looking for a home run with everybody on base, or otherwise, why bother with it? And again, it all goes back to the people and the product and the valuation, the four things that Brad mentioned. That's exactly what I look at. And when I look at a prospectus, I can page through that prospectus. I mean, I've seen so many of them in about 5 minutes and hit the parts that I want to look at. And, you know, it's the people, the board, how much experience they've had, who the people are on the board, are they, you know, the movers and shakers or not. I look at the cap table, see who put money in at what price, look at the valuation today. There aren't, I mean, most of the prospectuses that you're going to look at are mostly legalese and it's boilerplate stuff. But there's really only about 4 pages that count. So when I'm looking at a deal, that's where I focus, and I'm sure these guys do the same thing.
Great, thank you. Ron, Brad, from a financial return perspective, how closely do you look at what you think the deals are going to turn into, and how much of an impact does that have on your investment decision?
Well, I would reiterate what these two guys said initially on valuation. I think it's important to start off with the right valuation up front. In this market, you see different industries and different and stages of development at certain valuations, and so I think it's important that you start off in that group or with that type of valuation. Secondly, when you're making a presentation to an investor or investor group, they want to know what the potential rate of return is. And I think it's important that you communicate that to the investor or investor group. And so even though it may be, like Gary said, it may be size of market and the percentage of market, and therefore it's a guess today, it's still where you think you can go and what's your blueprint or your plan to get there. And so I think if it's not a 5 times or whatever, the investor may not look at it. But I think it's important that in your presentation you communicate your valuation and you communicate what you think your rate of return can be.
Great, thanks, Brad.
Yeah, I agree with both Ron and Gary, but I never went into a deal with a rigid number saying I have to get 30% IRR. It would,
No, but if you saw something that had 15, you'd look at it and say, just not enough returns
That's
attached
right.
to the risk.
No, that's right. And you would have goals like Gary was talking about hitting, a four-bagger as opposed to a single. I think that's good counsel. I think that's wise. But I never said, here are the bookends. It has to fit within those bookends. Otherwise, I won't look at it.
Sure.
Because things change over time.
Sure, but the main point I think that everybody said here is that if you're not aiming high enough and you don't achieve everything, which happens most of the time, you're just not gonna get the financial returns.
And then it's not worth the effort.
Yeah, and then I think there's probably a little too much of being conservative maybe in the Midwest compared to say on the coast as far as shooting here. You gotta shoot here because if you miss, here's still good, but if you're not shooting that high, then it's not gonna happen. Anyway, questions
I
from
would,
the,
I would like to add one thing. I've seen so many business plans and so many projections or forecasts that have a hockey stick.
sure,
We're gonna start off here and then we're gonna just shoot right up and we're gonna capture a huge percentage of the market. And that's okay if you do that, but you have to lay out and articulate how you're gonna get on that growth curve.
agreed.
And so the key there is laying out your plan to get on the growth curve. Because if you can't get on that growth curve and you can't hit your milestones, then don't put it in your forecast. Because the investors are gonna see right through it.
Great. Earl, we had a question back there.
Any advice in a pre-IPO situation where the offer is by somebody looking for investment just before IPO situation?
So to paraphrase your question, see if the panel got it the same way I did. If a company's far enough along that they're eyeing an IPO, how attractive is it to an investor to be kind of close to that? I guess my answer would be that these days that's very attractive because you've de-risked it and you have some visibility to where you're going to go from an exit perspective. But panelists, anybody have anything they want to add to that?
Well, I think that's pretty common today. There's a lot of that where companies need a little bridge to the IPO, and they do raise money that way. And usually it's successful.
Other way flipping it around is the IPO could be a way to try to lever and get investment or possibly sell the company too. So it kind of goes both directions. Other questions from the audience? One over here.
Brad, you mentioned finding the investor that's the right fit, and I try to be on kind of leading edge things, and I went to NBC, talking about cybersecurity a few years back, and like cybersecurity, it's gonna go outside here in Minnesota. How would I invest? So is there, I don't wanna waste my time going around to different people if it's not the right fit. Is there a way to, is there a resource to tap, like, that shows what the investors are interested in?
There isn't a yellow pages in that regard to answer that question, but it's a very good question because you're not going to go to a medical device investor with a cybersecurity deal and expect to get a positive response. So it's about hitting the receptor sites that fit, and that's probably just some hard resource networking, where you're going around and asking questions of either family offices, corporate strategics, or other investors that could include individuals or venture players who have the sensibility within that orbit. And that's probably the way that I would go about doing that.
I don't know if they release this, but does the state ever release the names of all the angels?
Yes,
Actually, they are, yeah.
They do.
There's a start.
It's a list from the angel tax credit, but it's just a list of names.
Yeah, no, it doesn't give them address or what they're
It
interested in.
doesn't
but-
say what they've invested in.
Yeah.
But
It just says they're an investor.
But usually those people like me are serial investors. I mean, we like to do it. We invest in things. So that's a good source of leads, I think.
And folks like Ron can connect you, folks like Brad can connect you, folks like me. and the Network Connect, we can connect you. So I think, as Brad said, you're just really building out a list and recognizing that you're probably going to have to ask for leads and help, and that list isn't going to be 5 people long. The list probably has got to be 100 or 200.
I have a question. And I think if I were starting over, I'd start working with universities, because a lot of good IP and ideas come from the universities. And a lot of the students and professors, they don't know what to do with it. And you could, and I've seen a lot of companies that have started because they talked to somebody at a university that had an idea. And they show them, and then you can show them how to start the company, how to get the IP going, how to raise money and all this. I helped start the Entrepreneurial Center up at St. Cloud State for that reason. And I know the University of Minnesota has a huge department for that. So I don't know, if I were looking around, if I wanted to start something, I'd be hanging around the universities and finding some ideas there. When Dr. Sturman, who was my co-founder of Cardiovascular Systems, died about 3 years ago, and this is following through with this example, his widow contacted me, and she lived in Switzerland, and she said, "Gary, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to be homeless." Dr. Sturman spent all of his money that he made at Cardiovascular System on his new technology and all the patents and everything like that. So I said, "Layla, why don't you just send me the patents? Let me look at it." And when I got them, I realized what this was. So we started CardioFlow, and she has a big piece of it, and we pay her as a consultant so much a month, and we've been doing that for 3 years. I met with a major company today, in fact, that might want to end up buying this company. But it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with knowing Len Sturman and and I knew how good he was at patents, and I knew how smart he was at developing technology in the medical field. And this is like Cardiovascular Systems, except about 4 generations beyond it. So if you can find an inventor, that's a good place to start.
You had, Henry, I'll get to you next. You had one other question, ma'am?
Are you handing out those ROI?
Sure, I actually have a few. Yeah, come on, and then I also have an idea on the security technology side for you too. Okay, Henry.
My question to the panel has to do with the loans. How would you suggest, or what would be your advice for looking at that loan option as opposed to equity? As a start,
Reliant? You can do it, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, actually, one of the companies I was involved with, Cardiovascular Systems, we did do a loan, but we did it out on the West Coast. And I think it just depends on what the terms of the loan are too. I mean, in how, or, whether you're tying up all your IP or anything like that. But a lot of these companies, in the beginning, I think are very difficult. At least I think it would be difficult for me to take a loan out on a company that's just getting started. But once they get rolling, then I think it's really a smart move to have, it increases your return on equity when you can do that. But you gotta do it when you already have some sales, and whether you're making money or not isn't that important at that time, but you're making sales and you're growing rapidly. At Cardiovascular, our first year we did 40 million, and then we did contact some venture funds in California that loaned us money. So I think we took down 50 million or something like that time. But I think you have to be careful if you're just a startup, and I would rather raise more equity capital as a startup until I felt that the company was moving along a little safer. And then you could do that would be my advice if someone asked me.
I would agree with that. I worked with this technology company that I'm the CFO with. We started off our first round of financing by taking a convertible debenture. It's a great vehicle to raise cash fast and to get out in the marketplace because you don't know what your valuation is, and to kind of set a point, or to wait to set a point for valuation to the future. On the other hand, like Gary said, it's much better to take capital in as capital, and there's less questions with respect to debt. Then they have to worry about valuing the company down the road. So,
Great, thanks. Good enough, better covered. And the back.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Luke Deary. I'm with a startup medical device company locally. It's a class 2 treatment for stress urinary incontinence. My question is specific to a form of fundraising, convertible debt or bridge loan agreements. We're just starting our seed round, and we originally were going to do convertible debt. I know it's been popular. Our CFO did some research recently. It sounds like people are starting to shy away from it because I feel like it really does kill the early seed stage investors. When you're going for a Series A, they get a discount at that price. It's really not worth as much as if they would have just got equity up front. On the flip side, it's also better for the founders. So,
Let me take that one. Every company I've been involved with, we keep it real simple. Straight equity, straight common stock. And I really avoid getting into the hybrid securities. And that way everybody's on the same page. It's fair for everybody. If you start a company and you're common and then preferred comes in above you and with participating preferred and all that kind of stuff, it'll come back to bite you. And if you can stick to common with every piece of financing, I think you're better off.
yeah, that's the exact change you just made. Is because at first conversations where I don't really know what I'm getting into with this investment. We like your product, we want to work with you, but it's still a question mark. So that's the change you made. I didn't know if that's a common perception or. I know it's commonly done. I've seen a lot of convertible debt transactions. Just look at the Angel Edge Cash Card website on the convertible debt that's issued. But it, to me, doesn't really make too much sense.
Well, I've done a lot of convertible debt deals, and I agree if you can get away with doing common, Gary, as a unifying agent at all levels, that's great, but that doesn't happen too often, so kudos to you if you've been able to pull that off, because I haven't seen it done that often, or at least it's in the minority of deals. So it's a matter of both structure and timing. The reason for people doing convertible debt is that it happens faster. In many instances, because people are motivated for the convertible debt returns, and it's also an issue of not putting a stake in the ground on valuation from your point of view as the founder, because valuation is a chess game. If you make the wrong move in move 1, you've made the wrong move in move 4. So if you screw the pooch by doing the wrong deal on number 1, you are going to screw yourself down the line. So if you can avoid that valuation tussle, which happens in the early stages because you don't know what you're worth, then you do a convertible bridge because it kicks the can down the road, but in a good way. But you always have to remember when you do a convertible bridge, it is a bridge. There's two sides. There's two piers. There's right now when you take in the money, and then there is the future when that note converts and normally converts into equity. So you better be ready the minute you take in the money to find the other side of the pier. But it avoids the valuation issue that can be a real deal killer.
Well, you see, I come from the side of starting the company. He comes from the side of investing in the company. So we have two different pieces of advice.
And
Okay.
And
I think
They're
it's
both
all
right, probably.
I think it's all, as I said earlier, I think it's also important to map out the different milestones and stages of development. In a medical device company, some medical device companies got to raise $100 million to get through all the way through FDA approval. And so you might go through multiple different rounds of financing. And as you look down the road, you might want to either attract a strategic, or you may want to hire, and Gary, maybe you can talk a little bit about this, hire an investment bank, like your friend, you know? Because institutionally raising capital, once they've gone through their due diligence and they underwrite, it can be a pretty easy way to raise capital also. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about raising capital institutionally like.
You mean through corporate finance?
Right, yeah.
Well, most of your brokerage firms have a corporate finance department but they look for little later stage deals usually. And they're not much, there really isn't interest at that stage in the friends and family round. I mean, they want to see a company that's got their feet on the ground. There are firms though in town that will raise money through high net worth individuals. They'll charge you, the typical charge, by the way, is about 10% cash and 10% warrants. That's kind of the typical one that most of these brokerage firms will have. And there's 3 or 4 of these firms in town that do this.
Yeah, and I would just say, make sure that you look at the milestones in your overall structure, because at Cirrus, we had about 7 rounds of financing before we finally got our strategic investor in. And when we got to the strategic, the early investors got crammed down. Their valuations got crammed quite a bit. And so that can be something to look at also.
It's painful.
Great. Other questions? All right, so we're pushing 7:30. Everybody stayed late and watched the election results. Just to wrap up for the panel, asked a question earlier about any advice that you had gotten that stuck with you. Here's an opportunity to just leave kind of one little nugget with the audience as a parting thought. So 30 seconds each. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
I already did it.
So investing is a leap of faith no matter how good you are. So my visual for you is to make that leap of faith a step over the curb and not a step over the Grand Canyon.
All right, good one. Ron?
My advice to entrepreneurs would be open to learning and be open to mentors and building a team around your product and your company.
Great. Gary, I'm not going to let you off the hook. You have to have one last little thing to share with us.
What was the question?
One last.
I thought I had already answered that one.
One last thought that you'd like to share with the audience. Any parting words, last nuggets of wisdom? 48 years in the investment industry, you probably have more than a few.
I could go on, but I think
Next time. But anyway, one.
one last nugget. You know, I can't think of anything else. I think I've covered it.
Okay, I got a question for you then, if you don't have one that's jumping out. So you mentioned that most investment banking firms now are interested in companies that are kind of further along.
Well, that'd be like Piper Jaffray.
Yeah, so
Royal Bank.
nowadays, do you have to be raising $20 million to interest a Piper Jaffray or RBC or whatever? So is it 20 million or?
At least, yes.
At least 20 million. So that's you can scratch investment banker, at least the big ones, off of your list. So that'll save you a little time and trouble.
But the small firms in town, their sweet spot is probably 3 million.
So that would be like Feltel and
Doherty.
Doherty. And anybody else come to mind? Brad or Ron?
There's what?
There's some M&A.
Somebody say something over here? Okay, well, anyway, Feltel and Doherty would probably be 2 of the smaller firms doing bite sizes that are in the range of probably what you folks are looking for. Anyway, our next reverse elevator pitch is February 7th. Want everybody to have a wonderful holiday season, and let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you.